Hey.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Nightshift with Andrea Up Late, a true crime podcast YouTube show that airs every Tuesday night or almost anywhere from 8 to 8:45 Eastern. I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Brian Sanders. How you doing, Brian?
Oh, great. I'm plugged in now, maybe.
We'll see. Are.
I don't know.
You may be a little Mr. Roboto, but it's going to work out just fine, I think. Well, hey guys, sorry we missed you last week. We this summer's made it a little bit more sporadic, but we're back. We're at it, so we should hopefully be dropping a show every Tuesday night, pretty much from now on. And I do have some backlog episodes that need to go onto Spotify and StreamYard and all of that, and it will. So I've got some people who have messaged me wondering, are we no longer on, just for audio listeners? And that's not true. I've just been negligent in downloading the stuff. So about to get back in business mode and get everything going again. So we are totally here. I'm reading the comments again. If you are new here, this is a live YouTube show, and so you are free to join in the comments. We like to do some back and forth, a little silly at the beginning. We go through the case. It's a great time to ask questions or clarify things in the chats. And then at the end of the show, we kind of sit back and chit chat with you guys. It's free. Just log into YouTube if you have a YouTube account. But otherwise, what's kicking?
Well, not a whole lot other than catching fish.
Yeah, I went fishing today. Brian caught a massive catfish.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did, in fact. I caught some spot the other day off of some shrimp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know why I got the giggles?
You got the giggles tonight.
I think I caught the catfish by accident, though.
You caught a homeless guy at the same time, and then we had to leave.
Yeah. Now, this is true. We were fishing, caught a catfish, fully wanted to celebrate, and then a stranger walked up, and you immediately gave me that look like, hey, pay attention to this person. He walked up on the small dock we were on, and I saw him looking out of the corner of his eye at me, at you, back at me, and it made me nervous. Didn't make me feel good. So this is a bit of advice. When you feel that in your gut, go ahead and just move out, which we did, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was a little weird. You didn't even kiss your fish. I got off the hook for you and everything.
I know. Also, this is a great. Andrea took care of the catfish, took the hook out, while I kept eyes on this guy.
Yeah, that's what I needed you to do.
Yeah, I need you to watch this guy.
Oh, goodness.
So anyway, trust your gut. Catch catfish. Oh, in a pond or a lake with two alligators that were swimming probably at one point 30 feet from us.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about a case tonight, y'all. We, if you haven't, I believe because we didn't have a show last week, but 2 weeks ago, our show was on a mysterious death of a man named Brandon Embry. It is a true cautionary tale. This man died. Go back and take a look. I've got it on Instagram on Andrea Up Late. It's on YouTube. You soon will be able to listen to it on Spotify if you can't already. But I do encourage you to look at the pictures, because when you hear that this man died per the medical examiner of unexplained causes or a natural death, go back and look at those pictures and tell me what you think. Leave some comments there and send me a message, whatever. But it's insane. I had a good one of the comments was actually really wise, and it just said along the lines like, it's a great reminder that men need to be careful too in a relationship. That one may have a part 2 coming out at some point, because we have an ex-girlfriend in that situation, that there's potential poisoning and all kinds of wild things going on. So take a listen to that. But for today, we have a case kind of reminiscent. If you guys remember the Brian Schaefer case from, I believe, Ohio in 2006, I think I titled it "A Man Walks into a Bar," because as far as everybody can tell, it's almost like he never walks back out, which he had to have walked back out, but literally no one has seen him since, or his vehicle or anything. This case is similar, but to make it even more complex, it involves 2 people, Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. So we are going to talk about them. But before we do, if you are a listener of the show, you know that we often will talk about pop culture moments that took place in the year of the case that we're talking about took place. So this time it's going to be 2005. We do talk often about the kind of weird mid-2000s This may be early enough that there's some stuff going on. Do you have some pop culture stuff for us, Brian?
I do, in fact. So 2005, that was almost 20 years, by the way. No.
Yeah.
20 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Almost 20 years ago. YouTube was invented.
Really?
Yeah, that kind of shocked. I don't know why. I don't know. It seems like YouTube's been around a lot longer. But that's 20 years ago, so.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I was younger when it came out than I was. But,
Me too.
And do you remember, I'm sorry, when it first came out, though, it was just, I'm trying to remember exactly what, it was just like homemade videos, like people's videos and like
yes,
random stuff, right?
Yes. And one of my cousins, they had filmed a video where my cousin wrestled with a chair and it broke and cut his face. That's the first time I remember hearing about YouTube. Because one of our buddies uploaded that video.
Is it still on there?
Story. I don't know. I've asked my brother to find it,
Okay.
and I don't think he's been able to find it. Anyway, that YouTube 2005. Guitar Hero.
Okay.
Was, I guess, like a new game that everybody started playing.
Golly, 2005. Okay.
Some dude named Tom Cruise jumped on a couch on Oprah Winfrey.
That was in 2005.
American Idol was.
Oh, okay.
And I think CSI started its first season.
Oh, very nice. Golly.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
Because it's like 4.
Now there's a bunch of different ones now.
Yeah. That was probably like mainstream's first kind of insight into crime scenes and how you work them and forensics. And it actually had an effect in the real world in police work. People often think there's a whole lot you can do in a crime scene. So sometimes people end up confessing that they committed a crime, when in fact there's not a whole lot of evidence forensically, but they believe from watching the show, all this crazy stuff can happen. Musically, Green Day was still relevant.
Okay.
And that was
I can see on Green Day.
Yeah, Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Holiday. Yeah. Yeah. Weezer's Beverly Hills.
Oh, I like that song.
What's funny is not everybody, some people would call them sellouts. And oh, they're making this pop music and selling out. But what are they singing about? Wanting to be rich and famous, kind of like being ironic. Whatever you call it. Killers, Mr. Brightside.
I like that one too.
I think we probably listen to that once a month. Yeah,
I think it was in a store or something just recently because it was in whenever I hear the tune, it stays for the day.
Yes.
Okay, what else?
Fall Out Boy, that Sugar We're Going Down.
Oh gosh.
Well, that's your favorite song.
It's actually it's actually not bad, but it's one it kind of keeps going. It doesn't go away.
Yeah. Photograph by Nickelback. that seemed to be coming back.
I was gonna say, you hear it all the time now, but Nickelback and Creed. The Foo Fighters. I suggest if you have an Alexa, you ask her to play Foo Fighters because she suddenly turns into Christopher Walken and she'll say, playing the Foo Fighters.
And then Toby Keith, As Good as I Once Was.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It wasn't my favorite of his, but it's fine.
Yeah. But that's about it for pop culture.
Okay. Well, that was 05.
Yeah. I mean,
what was going on in 05? Personally, I'm thinking I had nothing. I mean, I had graduated college and I was working as a nurse. Just, I don't know about you.
I was on patrol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Crazy to think, but yeah.
Okay. Hey, everybody in the chats. I'm not going to take a lot more time to bother just our audio listeners, but I see you all in there and I appreciate y'all. And I'm so good to hear from some of you guys I haven't heard from in a while. So, hey there. Welcome back. I guess we'll go on and get started. Again, this is kind of just a wild one. This is either a whodunit or it's a complete accident, in which case, whatever. Sad face. All right. You guys ready? We're going to talk about Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. So a little bit about their history individually. So Danielle Imbo was born August 7th of 1970 in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her father, John, was a singer. He's got kind of a cool background. He actually had a stage name Johnny October, and eventually he became a backup singer for Frankie Avalon.
Oh.
Yeah, so Danielle grew up in the music scene. Her father obviously had a huge love for music. Danielle did as well. As she grew older, she was known to be an avid reader of murder mysteries, my kind of girl, and later became a mortgage processor. She had an 18-month-old son, Joe Jr., in 2005, and she was a dedicated first-time mom at that point. So then a little bit about Richard. Richard Petrone Jr. was born in August of 1969 in Pennsylvania. Family and friends say that he was extremely hardworking. He was a laid-back guy. He was very family-oriented. In 2005, he was a single father to his 14-year-old daughter, Angela. He was working at that time at his family's bakery, still actually alongside his father, to the point of being a family man. The bakery was called Viking Pastries in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. Do we have any Philly or just Pennsylvania listeners in the chat? So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of the two of them. This is Danielle. So if you're just listening, Danielle was at the time 35 years old. She's got short dark hair, dark eyes. I've got one here of Brandon somewhere. Or Richard, excuse me, somewhere. Well, here's a missing poster, and that shows Richard and Danielle there. All right, so Danielle and Richard grew up in the same neighborhood there in Philly, and they knew each other on and off for most of their lives. Their families actually knew each other really well, if you can imagine growing up in the 70s in a suburban neighborhood there. So both of their families knew each other. But over the years, Danielle remained good friends with Richard's sister, but she kind of lost touch with Richard as the years went on. So let's see here. I've got my handwritten notes, y'all. How you doing?
Okay.
In 2001, Danielle met and fell in love with Joe Imbo. All right. She was continuing to further her career, but at the same time, she wanted to pursue her love of music. So she was in a cover band at this time. And they say that, like, all of her friends say that she gave off like a lot of Janis Joplin type vibes, which I think is pretty dope. And within a year of getting married, Joe expressed to Danielle that he wanted her to stop singing. He told her that she was married now and needed to stop going all over town to sing. So I told you we're going to create a sound, like a red flag sound. But I will consider that a bit of a red flag. I don't know. What say you, Brian? Because they didn't have kids. It wasn't like this was interfering with other life. And so she had a career. She was still working her day job that was making the money, but I would say her hobby and maybe side hustle was singing, but he did not like that now that she was married. To the fact that his words were that now you are married, basically.
Yes. You'll switch to camera.
I think that's
I would say it's at least one. It's something you want to make a note of. Because the next question would be, why is singing a problem now that you're married?
Right.
Meaning the jealousy factor. I'm
Correct.
assuming that's what.
That's what this is going to tend toward. And this is what she did when you met her. So what's the difference now, right?
Yeah.
He said it wasn't her place, and so she did comply, and they continued to go on about their lives. And in 2003, they welcomed a son whom they called Joe Jr. So in the year 2004, Danielle's husband, Joe, flew to Houston. So that's where the Super Bowl was being held that year, and he was very excited to attend. Well, when he gets back from his trip, he tells Danielle that he met another woman on the plane and he wants a divorce. That escalated quickly.
Okay.
As you can imagine, Danielle was incredibly shocked. She pleaded with Joe, but eventually divorce proceedings began. Her family says that Danielle struggled quite a bit with her divorce, as one can imagine under these circumstances, but I think to the point that they were a little concerned with her. She began chain smoking. She lost what they considered to be, a fairly alarming amount of weight, and isolated a little bit. But she starts kind of coming around. And it was around this time that her old childhood friend, Richard, the one we mentioned earlier, Petrone, came back into her life. So once they reconnected, they actually started dating pretty soon. They had not dated when they were kids. They just knew each other well, like we spoke on, right? So Richard's daughter, Angela, who, like I said, was 14 at the time of his disappearance, she was quoted to have said, Danielle was the first girl he ever really fell in love with and wanted to dedicate his time to. So it was clear to his daughter that he had really fallen head over heels for this woman, Danielle. So as time went on, Danielle's divorce was kind of dragging on. They were kind of in some different custody disputes and otherwise just couldn't agree upon a lot, she and Joe. So Danielle told Richard that they should put things on hold for a bit so she could focus on all of that, all of her divorce stuff, and raising her son. Friends will say that this hurt Richard. He was upset, but he did understand and he respected her wishes. So they were still friendly. I think she just wanted to pump the brakes on the romantic nature of their relationship for a little while. So imagine this, but Danielle's husband didn't have much luck with his new relationship that he started so quickly. So he comes back and pleads with Danielle to consider reconciliation. At first, she was a bit confused because she had not wanted him to up and leave her, right? But at this point, she realized that she just wasn't too swayed by his offer. I think too much had happened. There was too much water under that bridge. So she did maintain a visitation schedule with he and their son, Joe Jr. And in February 19th of 2005, she was hanging out with her friend, Christine. Christine is Richard's sister. So remember, I said Danielle had maintained a relationship with Richard's sister over the years. So they were good buddies still. So Christine was also going through a divorce at this time. So it seems that Danielle would just kind of go to her apartment, hang out, kind of commiserate together, and spend a lot of time together. So on this night of February 19th, Richard was out at a local bar. And he wasn't out a whole lot. Remember, he was a single dad at this point. So he was at a local bar and wanted company. So he calls his sister, Christine, to come, see if she'd come hang out with him. She decided that she wanted to stay in for the night, but she went on and passed the offer over to Danielle. She said, do you want to go hang out with Richard? And Richard was actually very thrilled when Danielle agreed to go out that night. So it was pretty widely known by now that Joe, Danielle's husband, was pretty volatile. Okay. So the arguing had gotten a bit terrible leading up into these divorce proceedings during their negotiations. It seemed that Richard was pretty kind and gentle with Danielle. So she would tell friends and Christine that's something that she noticed in him. Like he took care of her and she really enjoyed that aspect of Richard. She responded to that. So Richard picked Danielle up in his black 2001 Dodge Dakota. They drove to a bar named Abilene's on Philadelphia's South Street. There they met up with two of Richard's friends, Anthony and Michelle. Anthony and Michelle say that Danielle and Richard seemed very happy that night. They were watching a band play. They were laughing and kissing. They said that they were even comparing schedules to try to arrange for a date the following weekend. So after a while, Anthony and Michelle asked Danielle and Richard to go with them to another bar. They just kind of wanted to bar hop that night. But evidently, Richard and Danielle both said no. And they both said that they had an early morning. So at 11:45 p.m., so a pretty reasonable time, Richard and Danielle gathered their things to leave. And their buddies, Anthony and Michelle, head on out. But they heard Richard saying that he would drive Danielle home to Mount Laurel. That's where she lived. Before he went back to his house at South Philly. So this drive would be about a half an hour. Okay. It's about a 22-mile trip between the two, between where Danielle lived and where he lives. So every route that I've found between the two towns involves crossing over the Delaware River. So this would be if he's going from where they are at Abilene's in Philly to Danielle's house in Mount Laurel. Okay, this is a large river, the Delaware River. So it spans about 301 miles. It has an average depth of 40 feet. So we're going to come back to the idea of that river, okay? Richard and Danielle walked outside, and they have never been seen again. Neither has his Dodge Dakota. So Danielle, Richard, and that truck leave Abilene's at 11:45 that night in 2005, and none of them or the truck have been seen since. No one knows exactly where Richard parked that night, but Richard did make a comment to Anthony that he was lucky to have been able to find a spot so close to the bar. And let me show you why that is. Let's see here. I'm going to show you. So this would be an idea of South Street. Okay. You can see that it's kind of crowded. I'm going to go on to describe it to you here in a little while, but this is also a different view of that same part of the street. And this is the bar Abilene's. So you can tell that this is probably somewhere that it would be difficult to get a spot, right next to the place you're going to be going to. Okay. Alrighty. So the day following, Danielle did not show up to her hair appointment. She actually was getting her hair done at the place where Christine, her friend, Richard's sister, works. She didn't show up, and Christine was like, that's super weird. She would never just be a no-show. She would always call. And also, that's not just a random hair place. This is one of her best friends. So she would have let her know if she wasn't coming for some reason. So both Danielle and Richard's families remember they're friendly, attempted communication with them both, but only got voicemails. So Danielle's brother actually used his spare key to access her house. He said when he went inside, it was just kind of dark. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except for she just wasn't home. So finally, it was time for Joe Jr.'s father, Joe, right, to drop him back home at 3 p.m. this following day. It was a Sunday, but Danielle was not there. This really increased the fear in her family once they realized that they'd been calling her, couldn't get her. She's not home, and now she's not home when she's supposed to get her child back from his father, because John, her brother, says there's no way in the world that she would ever not be present to have the baby, to be home when her baby comes back to her. So finally that afternoon, both Danielle and Richard's family contacted the police. The local department had a policy to wait 48 hours. We talk about this often on when, and we've also talked about the idea that so they're saying that their policy at the time at this police department was to wait 48 hours before starting an investigation into a missing persons case, or to consider it a missing person. We know that you can be an adult and do whatever you want and not be a missing person. Now, would this be that, if they say 48 hours, would it be possible that someone is starting to look into leads or do some footwork before the 48 hours, or no?
I don't, in 05, especially in Philadelphia.
They've got a lot of other stuff going on.
No, I wouldn't imagine they would. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn. In 05, I was taking reports as a patrol officer.
Yeah.
We didn't have any kind of set rule like that. One thing that could delay this potentially would be that this is like a date, night they go out, they left the bar together.
Okay.
These friends were like, oh, they were leaving,
Yeah.
That maybe the idea was they went off to go do something else. Now, once they don't start showing up, I don't know.
Right.
The 48-hour thing is strange.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that was their policy at the time, but the couple's family obviously refused to wait to start their investigation. So Danielle's brother, John, and Richard's father, Richard Petrone Sr., drove all through the city looking for Richard's truck. So they scanned every side street. They said that they were going up and down alleys between Philly and Mount Laurel. So remember when I mentioned the Delaware River? I'm going to show you, I think, did I just not upload photo? I apologize to listeners. Now I've got all the, I guess I did not. Okay. We'll put him up on Instagram. But, so when I mentioned the Delaware River earlier, I was telling you that it was about 300 miles long and about 40 feet deep on average, if you remember. So they checked all the bridges that Richard could have taken. So these bridges have kind of fun names, but they would be the Walt Whitman, the Ben Franklin, and the Betsy Ross. So these would have been the bridges that Richard could have taken to get from Abilene's in Philadelphia to Mount Laurel, where Danielle lived. So they all gathered together, meaning the family. They all gathered together to work as hard as they possibly could to find Danielle and Richard. And the following day, they organized a search using the grid method, all right, that expanded hundreds of miles in every direction. They all carried pictures of Richard's truck and the license plate number. Danielle's brother even spent about $1,200 to hire a Camden police officer to fly a helicopter to search the city.
Okay.
So, I mean, they're doing everything they can within the first 24 to 48 hours. Nothing at all was found. And so the investigation now can begin. It's been the 48 hours past that needed to happen, okay? No eyewitnesses were found. There was no one coming forward to say that they saw them even just leave the bar. You saw the street. I put a picture up. It's just it's a very, looks like a small, like a narrow street with a ton of bars and cafes and restaurants and, hole in the wall places that was said to have been very packed now, but also in 2005, particularly on a Saturday night. So there was no activity on either of their bank accounts, credit cards, or cell phones. Additionally, there were no ATM cameras that revealed the couple, and there were no toll bridge cameras. But we are going to come back to that as well. So keep in mind, and interrupt at any point if you have notes that if I'm talking about anything that you have questions about. So keep in mind that the area that the bar was located in the night that they went missing, okay, this is what I was just trying to explain to you. So the street is lined with bars and restaurants. There's a ton of live music venues, boutiques, tattoo parlors, hair braid station. I mean, it's, you name it, it's packed. There's an outdoor stand called Jim's Philly Cheesesteaks, and evidently there would have usually been a line out the door and around the corner there, particularly, like I said, on a Saturday night. So, like, essentially, that's that. That's all we have leading up to and during the disappearance of them and the first 48 hours after. So, what are you guys thinking in the chats? Let me know what you're thinking right now. There's not much for you to necessarily know, but what would be some ideas?
Well, you've already mentioned the last known path they were going to take or location they were going to. They would have crossed the Delaware River. Okay, so they got to cross a body of water, which a lot of missing person cases end up in the water. So people completely vanish. You have a missing truck that they're looking for. So no truck and two people. Potentially, the first thing I'm thinking is water. Either going off a bridge. Okay, go ahead. Either going off a bridge, or what I've learned is that not everybody can put a boat down in the water at a boat ramp, and sometimes boat ramps are slippery. You know what I mean? So even if there's a spot they knew about or someone knew about, said, hey, go check out down by the edge of the water. Something that is, if you go off a bridge, then there's got to be damage to the bridge. There's got to be some evidence that you're going off the bridge. If you're going out by the side of the road sort of thing, and now you got a missing truck, the whole thing's got to go over, which usually leaves some kind of damage, right? Yeah.
So let's talk about that. We're going to talk, that's going to be our second theory that we talk about. The first theory, just for me, just to get it off the table, because I find it preposterous, but one of the first theories some people have is that potentially they ran off to start a new life together. I consider this highly unrealistic. They each had children at home. They were both known to be very close to their families. Again, there was no activity to their debit cards, bank accounts, their phones, nothing like that. And you've got to add in, after all of these years, I mean, that was 2005. So we're pushing, it's been 24 and a half years. They've not resurfaced, been heard about, heard from, talked to. Like, I find that one, I'm taking it off the table. You get that?
Well, nothing that we know of why they would have to do that.
And even if they just chose to, I think that the whispers are such that, her ex-husband or soon-to-be ex-husband was volatile and they just wanted to get away from him and run off together. That doesn't account for the children part and the rest of their family. You know.
That's if you've got two adults who have children who have a stake in conformity, they've got jobs or whatever, they're not just going to up and run off. And people act like it's real easy to do that and not get detected somehow.
Right.
It's almost impossible to do. And at some point,
no clothes, no nothing, yet they had no new activity in their banks. Like,
they're even talking to their friends, because it sounds like their friends are credible. They're talking to their friends about planning future dates, looking at calendars. Hey, we're going to get together. Like, yeah, I don't know. There's nothing right now that I would say to lean that way.
You might be onto something, Bosco. We're going to get there. Another theory is running off the road into the water, like we just spoke on. Now, this would be, I have two theories in my head that each can be plausible, and this is one of them. I'm not sure if I'm leaning here, but this is definitely one of the top two that I've got. So initially, police searched the area of water nearest where the couple possibly could have run off the road. So they looked at a couple of spots. They actually did pull up several vehicles. None were Richard's Dodge Dakota with license plate YFH2319. They also searched a swamp. There's a kind of a big swampland in nearby Tennicum Township, and they found nothing. So in March of 2022, okay, so 17 years later, the company Adventures with Purpose. If you aren't familiar, they have now, I think, their own TikTok channel. You can find them on YouTube. They've become pretty mainstream, and their name is out there, which is pretty great. But they're a search and recovery team, and so their specialty is to pull vehicles from bodies of water. And so it could be, at any given point, it could be someone. We just saw one, I think, a couple of days ago where it was actually two teenagers who have been missing since, I think, the year 20 or 2000. I think like 24 years they've been missing, and they were young, like 16, 18, something like that, and had simply run off the road. They had not met with foul play. They had not run away. Nothing bad in that sense happened to them, malicious. They just simply run off a road into a body of water. And so to their families, it's been 24 years of searching for their missing children, that in their brains, I'm sure, could have been abducted or God knows what. And so Adventures with Purpose, this is a great example of what they do. They can talk to families, ask some questions about the routes people take, the conditions, the time of day, different things like that. And they do a really good job of honing in kind of like on where they think a car would be if it had in fact landed in that body of water. So while sometimes local law enforcement search and rescue may kind of dredge or look, sometimes it's not always in the spot right where the car is going to be. Anyway, so Adventures with Purpose will go and they get on boats, they do all the stuff, they use the sonar, and then they will find, and it can be emotional to watch because of course they're resolving a missing persons case at that point. And so often they will find the vehicle, they go under there, scrape off the license plate. When it matches, they make the call. They'll make a call to 911 or local dispatch. They'll make a call to the family who has already hired them to come take on the case anyway. And they usually have like local dispatch there, an officer, the family, and because they can tell usually before they pull the car out whether or not there remains. So oftentimes it's the two bodies that were missing, whatever. So Adventures with Purpose takes on this case of Danielle and Richard in 2022. So again, 17 years after they went missing. They have been searching the Delaware River. They have actually previously done search and rescue or recovery missions in the Delaware River. So this was not new to them there. But so far, however, no evidence that's relevant to the disappearance of Richard and Danielle has been covered from them. There have been thoughts, though, that Adventures with Purpose might be going off an incorrect lead, or let's just say an incomplete lead. So remember earlier when I said that there were no toll cameras that caught the two. And so that's the idea that a lot of people thought, well, none of these bridges toll cameras got them. So like they had to have like really never left that little area. So that's a true statement that no toll cameras caught them. However, it's true because there were actually no cameras going from Pennsylvania to New Jersey that year. So see, Mount Laurel, where Danielle lived, Mount Laurel was actually across state lines in New Jersey. It wasn't that far away distance-wise, but it was into the next state of New Jersey. And there were also no tolls. So not just cameras, but also no tolls going into New Jersey. So evidently the original thought was kind of worded, and you know how we've talked about this kind of thing, but over time things morph and ideas kind of change, or you kind of forget your original theory on things. And so I guess evidently initially the verbiage was kind of like, we don't know if they made it to New Jersey because there were no cameras on the Ben Franklin when they went missing. And over all these years, that's kind of morphed into like, we didn't catch them on any cameras, so they never made it to New Jersey.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Were you going to say something about that?
No, just what we harp on. You miss one thing, or information is misconstrued, and then you could be wasting a whole lot of time. I'm not saying they are, but that will be a perfect example.
Yep.
Of somehow losing something in translation. Oh, we don't have them on the cameras. Oh, that means they never came through.
Right.
When reality is you don't have any of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with this line of thought, evidently the water search may actually need to extend or exist elsewhere entirely. I have read that this information has been passed along to Adventures with Purpose, but it's unclear whether or not they've expanded their search just yet. Again, it was just 2 years ago that they took on the case. So at least from what I can gather, they do know about it. But I mean, that could be, off a pond, and there are some maps that show the way he would go if Richard drove her actually back to Mount Laurel to her home and they crossed into New Jersey. And there is one area that from the road, it looks like road guardrail, like small decline in the grass there, like into a small ditch and just a wood line. If you look at an aerial view, behind that line of trees is a giant body of water. And it doesn't look like it at all from the road. So, I mean, just something as simple as that, where they looked and didn't see any damaged guardrails, any mud skids, any, disturbed terrain on the banks of these other bodies of water. The ones there were not searched because the assumption was that they didn't get that far. So I think that's a very plausible theory. And that one kind of is staying up there for me. So let's talk Robert Carey. So he also goes by Bobby Carey. There are thoughts that Richard owed gambling money to Robert Carey. So Robert ran a pill mill outside of town. Some think he is some way involved in this. He committed suicide, however, in 2010 while in prison awaiting conviction on drug charges. Okay. So that's one thought, that potentially Richard had a bit of a gambling debt to be owed. This pill mill guy wasn't, the best kind of guy around, and that maybe he had something to do with it. Okay, cool. So I'm going to read you also kind of in pill mill world a little bit. Here's another theory, and Brian, this will interest you as it involves gang activity. For those of you who don't know, Brian is a retired homicide lieutenant, and much of his specialty over the years was gangs. All right, so according to an article out of this online publication called Big Trial, I'm just going to read you that article directly. So it says, did the pagans, this is by George Anastasia, and this looks like this was written in 2016. And so it says, did the pagans have something to do with the disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr., a couple last seen leaving a bar on South Street? For those of you that aren't aware, the Pagans is a motorcycle club or a biker gang, if you will, that Brian could do a whole entire 7-part show on. So it says the FBI may think so. In a bizarre twist to what is already a bizarre trial, the Imbo Petrone disappearance and suspected murder may have been alluded to during a tape played at the Pill Mill trial of Dr. William O'Brien. He is... Sorry, y'all, my eyes. He's charged with conspiring with the pagans in a multi-million-dollar prescription pill scam. So check this out. Charged with, back in July, Patrick Treacy, a member of the outlaw motorcycle gang, was questioned about a, quote, double homicide, although the victims were not identified. So this is a tape that they played at this trial. So he says, quote, this pagan motorcycle club member says, I didn't murder nobody. He was 48 years old at the time. He said in a taped interview played today for the jury at the Pill Mill trial. The interview lasted about 40 minutes and was being conducted by the FBI agent Vito Rosselli. That is who is lead on Danielle and Richard's case. On the audio and videotape, Rosselli, the FBI agent, urges this guy Treacy to, quote, get ahead of all the bullshit that's going to be coming down, and tells him, in order to help yourself, you got to clean this up. And what had happened was that Tracy guy had made mention of a double homicide on a jail phone tape around that would have linked up to around the time that Richard and Danielle went missing. This only gets confusing because there was a separate double homicide near that time, but they're trying to hone in on whether or not that's what he was referring to or not. And so that started with the fact that this doctor was prescribing, and unfortunately this happens, but he was contributing to this pill mill because he was giving all these meds at hardly any cost to all these pagans who, I think at one time, the one that we're referencing there had like 74,000 oxys over the course of however long. I mean, it was a big multi-million-dollar pill mill scam between these pagan outlaws and this doctor writing these scripts. So that was yucky, but that kind of all ties into then, because we have the parallel theory of the potential gambling debt and Richard and a guy in a pill mill. So a few of these things kind of link a little bit without knowing more details about those because they're not available to us. Yeah. That's as deep as we can get into that. But
when we do victimology on murder cases, it's the same thing with missing person. You just look at their background. Because you don't know whether you're dealing with a murder or a kidnapping or just a missing person. In that sense, like nothing nefarious. But if they have anything like that, like with Richard owing money, right? They just mixed that up. Richard, right?
They're saying that he did. Yeah, some say that he did. I can't confirm that.
Right. And usually something like that, when you owe somebody money, unless the person you owe money to has a history of violence, a lot of times you don't jump straight to that conclusion. Right. It's possible. But
the guy in theory he owed money to, like, was a big guy and the member of this pill mill. Now, I don't know if he also was a pagan.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
But we have the FBI talking to an incarcerated pagan who had a jail phone call that mentioned a double homicide that was also involved in a pill mill.
And I think something like that, well, I don't want to get too far ahead, but something like that, we citizens won't know anything about until bodies are recovered or that vehicle's recovered. And it may be something like that where they know exactly who did it, why it was done, how it was done. They've just got to find the vehicles and the bodies in order to charge. Yeah. Because if you have anybody cooperating and they're talking about a double homicide, then it's a lot easier to actually narrow down what they're talking about, and you can confirm which.
Sure.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But and then of course when questioned, like I said, he said I didn't kill nobody, and then he didn't cooperate. You know.
Yeah.
Because people tend to forget that jail stuff is recorded.
Yes.
So finally we're gonna get to. We had some people in the chats mention it, but we have Danielle's husband, Joe Imbo. All right, I've got a picture of Joe for your.
So when you had mentioned earlier, as far as investigators would have known, the friend said that Richard was going to give Danielle a ride home.
Yes, the couple that they were with overheard him saying, I can just take you back.
Because if you're thinking, or if it starts to look like that, it doesn't look like they disappeared off a bridge or over a body of water. How do they just vanish? That sort of thing. Start to go down the path of potentially a murder. That's why I was jotting notes earlier when you were talking, like, because then the person who would have a motive or a reason to want to kill them would know where, or at least hide or set up an ambush.
So we'll discuss the likelihood of that. So we're going to get to, I just put a picture up a moment ago. Again, all these pictures will be on Andrea Up Late Instagram. We have Danielle's husband, Joe Imbo. So in the months prior to the disappearance of Richard and Danielle, I've told you that their arguments got heated. We started, your first reference tonight about Joe Imbo was that when they first got married, he wanted her to quit her passion, her hobby of singing in this band, this cover band around town, because he told her it wasn't her place. Mm-hmm. She was married now. She didn't need to be, going around town doing that. So it's kind of our first exchange with him, or knowledge of his character a little bit. And then as time went on, we've heard about some arguments they had, some jealousy issues, definitely some volatility there. And so we know that it's said that in the months prior to their disappearance, that Joe, her husband, called Richard at least 3 different times. He knew where he lived. He knew where he worked, warning him to stay away from Danielle. On one of those calls, allegedly, Joe threatened to come to Richard's bakery with a baseball bat and kill him if he didn't stay away from Danielle. Now, does this a murderer make him? No, but he's an angry dude with some jealous issues, and we know that fully, right? Mm-hmm. Danielle and Joe also had some heated times. During one of their pretty angry arguments, Joe allegedly threw their son's high chair, not with the child in it, but the high chair, across the room and against where it hit a wall. He now will say he doesn't quite remember that happening. Joe also he was able to get her. Now, there are conflicting reports on this. I almost think that she gave him her password to her voicemail. Okay. My assumption would be that he probably demanded it. It kind of sounds that way. I'm sure he could have just figured it out, but I would think it's one of these, like, we're going to know each other's stuff. Like, at least he's going to know hers, right? So he had her password to her voicemail, and evidently Joe had used that password multiple times to access her voicemail prior to her disappearance. So he's calling Richard, threatening him. He's checking her voicemail constantly, kind of getting in her stuff. Okay. So Joe's alibi, you may wonder what his alibi is, was that he was at a child's birthday party about 50 miles away the night that they disappeared. Also there at this party was his father and mother, and the host of the party, a guy named Alex. He was Joe's friend, and he's a retired NYPD detective, and Joe's father's also a retired police officer. So Joe denies any involvement. He volunteered a polygraph, but the results were inconclusive. So the FBI agent lead on the case, Vito Rosselli, remember we just mentioned him moments ago in that drug mill motorcycle club case, states that he won't discuss the results of the polygraph. He's said before that, kind of everybody has their case, and this is his. Like, this is one that he doesn't want to retire on. He doesn't want to quit chasing. He likes to talk. He keeps the important stuff at bay, but he does like talking about it. He likes to continue to talk about it. And he does not keep it hidden that he thinks there's some interest here. He will say that Joe is not a suspect. He has most certainly not been ruled out, though. Right. They'll kind of say that early on sometimes. We've been able to rule out X, Y, Z due to these reasons or these alibis. So even though we kind of have this alibi for him, he's still not ruling this guy out. So there are whispers, this I cannot confirm, obviously, but that Joe may have some dealings with the mob, might have had some friends or family within that kind of a situation. And so the FBI actually, let's talk quickly about, and I'm not sure if this is something, I know this isn't necessarily your thing, and neither one of us are giant fans of the idea of a polygraph, but when we say that the results come back inconclusive, as far as I know, that doesn't mean pass, right? It doesn't, I know what the word inconclusive means, but we say that they fail a polygraph. We also say that they pass, right? This inconclusive is just what it sounds like, right? Like, we can't determine a result. Generally speaking. That's what okay. So again, Vito Rosselli, the FBI lead on this, that's one thing he won't discuss is that polygraph. Okay. So we don't know the types of things that were discussed. We can only assume. So evidently it's been the longstanding belief of the FBI that the couple were met with foul play. So usually it's the other way around. Usually I feel like they'll say things like, well, we still have to work on this river or look at this. I think they kind of, appeal to the public in the sense of the lesser in severity and as they work the case, but it's kind of instead like, They did go back and dredge parts of the Delaware River. And I think that was to no avail for sure. Imbo has full custody of their son, and Danielle's family does see him at prescribed times throughout the year. But they also, FBI, to go back to this, really are actually looking at a murder for hire. That's been their longstanding.
Which would make sense, because the one question I would say, how many times did the FBI get involved in a missing person case?
That was my first question to you.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're talking about an FBI agent who is lead on a missing person case, who has already, potentially talked publicly about the case, yeah, that would lead me to believe that it's something connected that falls in their purview or in their jurisdiction, their ability. But like the one thing that I would probably say is just that usually if the FBI is involved in some type of organized crime investigation or something more than just we got a missing person. So yes, that's what it looks like now, whether it's the ex-husband or not. But when you're looking at these different avenues of natural causes and going into a body of water or something like that,
right?
Versus pagan connection with pill mill, owed money. When it's something like that, usually it's that person that gets the violence, whatever, directed at him. It's not necessarily that person and an unknown person.
Well, if we're looking at, if we're talking about the ex-husband, and if he's involved in the hire, then both of them are directed, or his anger, recipients.
Right. And that's what I was going to say is, when you're doing victimology, if you've got two people, one could be the potential target and the other person, sadly, could be collateral. And something like this, where also you have a truck that disappears.
So there were a ton of chop shops around that area. And then if you go back and read accounts of just everyday citizens, and then those that are criminally minded, anywhere, I'm sure, but particularly in that area at the time, they'll say like they take a car without a title. They take a car without a lot of questions, particularly if you're not wanting money for it. So if somebody just needs to off a car.
Yeah.
And if we're going down the theory of a murder for hire, then you already know people, because you know someone that you can hire to commit a double murder. So you, I'm sure, know somebody in the chop shop business. So that's one of those. The only way that can get a little weird, unless this is, which if this is what happened, I think this would have been a professional, because no one's spoken and a lot of time has gone by and no one's been caught. But if you're able to have a professional job done like this, double homicide, car gone, no witnesses, to be able to do that, that's a big deal. And in the sense of, we see how packed the area was they were at, where they were downtown like that, and to not have witnesses on anything at all, them leaving the bar, being confronted in the park. Who's to say that it was in the parking lot, right? Who's to say they didn't get followed or pretended to be pulled over or whatever? And so I'm losing my train of thought there, but
I don't want to jump in.
No, it just had to do with, if you're hiring someone, it had to have been a professional job. And I don't know, go for it.
Well, I was going to say, in that area, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, if you're dealing with any type of criminal family type of stuff, Roy DeMeo and some of his people years ago, people get murdered and then cars get crushed and they end up in a junkyard somewhere, but they're, crushed, compacted. So you could.
Well, when I said chop shop, I also mean, I guess in my brain, I'm thinking, take it apart, strip it, or literally crush it.
Crush it.
Some people say they could have been in the car with a crusher.
That's what that's why I mentioned, like Roy DeMeo comes to mind. But yes, just like that, where people that work for him, and
kind of like a turn the head, I'm getting rid of this car.
They would shoot people, not necessarily Roy would, but some of the people associated with him, and shoot people, put them in the trunk of a car, crush the car, and then the car disappears. Wherever it goes for scrap metal, whatever, something like that can happen very, very easily. And the person who even crushes the truck has no clue.
That's what I'm saying. Turn your head, meaning not the victim, but the person who works there turns their head. They take care of the thing.
Yeah, or they may not even know what they're doing is linked to a murder. Yeah. What
I was going to say when I lost my train of thought was just that it would have had to have been a professional, also in the sense that their plans were impromptu. So this was just a night of, I'm going to, come meet me at the bar. Richard called his sister first. She said no. She gets Danielle to go. She meets, so it's kind of like none of these plans had been, it wasn't like a longstanding plan. It wasn't someone's routine on the way to work situation. Yeah. So, but it would have been someone obviously professional and knew how to follow someone and knew whoever the original target would have been. Sounds like it would have been Richard, actually, if husband's involved, but maybe not. I mean, his anger could have turned to her, again, he continues to deny involvement, but the FBI will say that they have considerable leads and they say nothing else.
Yeah.
Not that I expect them to, but I'm saying that they're still working the case.
Yeah.
This is not cold or just, it's not deemed missing.
Yeah. And sadly, a case like this, you're dealing with 2 decades for a family to not have any answers. And to be part of the team investigating that and knowing those things and not being able to say it is tough too. I think the main thing is that if you still have an FBI agent who's on, assigned to the case, or Philadelphia or some of these other agencies around there, they're all still working collectively. I think there's hope in that.
Yeah, they are. So this case is still open and being actively investigated by the FBI, Philadelphia Police Department, Mount Laurel Police Department, New Jersey State Police, and the Burlington County Prosecutor's Office. The FBI is currently offering a $15,000 reward to anyone with information leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone involved in this case. A couple of years ago, it was up to $50,000 with other private contributors and donors. So I'm not sure where that part of it stands currently. But the family at this point, I believe, one of the parents has passed away. It's just kind of time has gone by. It'll be 20 years in February. So it's a crazy one. I think that, we've got someone in the chat, Bosco, saying John Gotti died in 2002 and ran things from prison. I mean, I don't know. Once we get into, gosh, I didn't realize it was 2002. Once we get into, that kind of talk, which I know it's speculatory, but this is speculatory based off of things the FBI have said, that they have continued to kind of lean in the direction of foul play, more specifically a murder for hire type situation. So they have a reason to think that. That's not just one you jump to, I don't think.
Yeah, and I mean, there's probably ways that, you get involved early on where you find the pattern that the missing persons, whatever they were supposed to be doing, and if they were going back to her home, obviously that's where you go. You potentially do a search warrant there as the case carries on, his as well. But if you could go to her place and then you understand what the house looks like, the setup, you canvass that area, you just work it backwards like that. So you can then rule out, okay, they never made it this far potentially. Or yes, they did, and we as the public never know that. That's part of the investigation.
I do think equally as, I can't say equally, but just as likely could be, obviously, is the water situation. We've talked about that often, how, we had that Riley Strand, in Nashville, a few months ago that sadly was walking and it felt like he would have been met with foul play. It all feels like something terrible would have happened to him. And really, it sounds like he was inebriated and wound up in the water. And while it's super sad and it took days to find his body and recover his body, like that's simply what was going on or what happened. And sometimes it's just as simple as that. So there were a lot of bodies of water. Like we said, maybe that search for the water has been, not expanded where maybe it needs to be based on some findings we've had now. But also, again, I'm going with what the FBI said. I'm gonna stick with that.
Yeah, it's people don't People don't have the time or resources to chase. Well, I don't even want to say chase leads, but it sounds like they know
what they're doing.
In other words, like that. I mean, we know they know like that. Like they've got something.
Well, pertaining to this case, yes.
Yes, that's very substantial, which is why he's talking about it and why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hoo-wee.
Mm-hmm. Some of the comments were about in the chats were about organized crime. Yes, it's still around. It's obviously spread down the East Coast and elsewhere and out in the West Coast and pagans and, motorcycle clubs. You got, a lot of criminal organizations like that. It's all over. So if you start to get into that during an investigation, that becomes heavy as well, because then you're getting into other agencies with their ongoing RICO investigations or OSADEF or whatever. So, but that also gives you a lot of information that could potentially help you with your what starts as a missing person case and gets into potentially murder for hire or whatever else.
Yeah. What say you?
My gut, just off of that, will be that it looks more like a hired hit and to get rid of a truck and to people type of thing. And I hate to say it that way, but you physically have to have three things that have not been recovered yet, which I would probably assume all three are together. Just like you had said, you could crush a truck with bodies in it. You can sink a truck with bodies in it. If you were
and that's the piece we didn't talk about. It could be that they're in the water, but also not because they drove off of their own accord.
Yes. And that's one of those things too that movies often make like murder for hire cases like these straight up assassins that are so good at what they do. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just the person who's willing to take the money and do the hit. And
that's why I always say it's somebody good in the sense of the amount of time that has passed.
Yes.
It's likely someone who's leading a life of criminal activity, and the fact that they're probably in and out, whatever, like, and not talking.
Yes. Yeah. So you look at someone like Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman, who did murder for hire for many years, and he was good. He could make people disappear. Then you've got some other people that get hired and they sell themselves as being really good, and then they're not. And then they get caught and then they roll over, and then the person that hires them gets caught. But yeah, the fact that 20 years, not a whole lot has come out of the case other than the FBI is working it. And
they're still working it. And that was my first question when I started reading about this. But I looked at you and I said, how often is it in your experience that, not with minors, that the FBI would get involved in two adults that go missing?
Which also, for clarification, usually you are not going to have the FBI working a murder case if it is in something like the jurisdiction of Philadelphia or something.
Yeah.
Because they have their units that do that. Yeah. That's their jurisdiction. The FBI works the other side. So I'd probably say directly linked to something like that, to a criminal organization, the murder for hire thing. That can still be, a former husband or ex-husband who's jealous. That could be someone that he owed money to, or he was into something else that they know about and they can't talk about, because that leads you directly to the suspects who can't be charged until evidence is recovered, which is usually bodies.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's that, guys. We'll post all these pictures and more info like that on Andrea Up Late on Instagram. And then I will drop it to Spotify or iTunes, all of that stuff here. If not this week, next week. I've got a couple of old ones that I need to put up. So I've been pretty negligent on that. So I apologize. It's been a busy summer, which has been great.
It has been.
It has been. Oh my gosh, over here dodging homeless people and catfish.
Yeah. A little unnerving. It's just that feeling, huh? Just that we need to get up out of here kind of thing.
Yeah, I think when he starts asking the kids where they're from,
yeah,
that's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's the red flag.
So on Saturday this past one was July 20th. So that actually marks 4 years to the day, in the day that Grant Solomon died. So, if you guys are listeners of the show, you likely have heard us talk and have multiple shows with, Grant's mother and just talking about that case. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to go back and listen and read about that and follow all the justice, Freedom for Gracie and Justice for Grant. You can Google that and find all the information you need. But that being said, I'm actually wearing, it reminded me of Minor League. I don't think you can see it. League Studios t-shirt. That's our buddy Bill Schofield, runs Minor League Studios, and he makes t-shirts, does a lot of our merch. And so he actually had made the fundraiser t-shirts that we did for Grant's family, for everything to be money toward that investigation. And we're going to take those off pretty soon. They've been up for a while, been live. And so again, 100% of those proceeds go to the Justice for Grant cause. Okay, so once we get all those orders wrapped up, I'm going to take whatever money that was made from those, and 100% of that, like I said, goes to Grant's mother, Angie, and to that family in their fight for justice for Grant. So please go back to Minor League Studios. You can visit his page either on Instagram or just on the web, and you can find those shirts. These are really pretty great shirts, and they're not your typical fundraising shirts, I don't think. There's t-shirts and tank tops. So check that out. Again, it's been 4 years, 4 very tough years for that family. So check that out. We've got Bosco in the chat saying he got his stickers. We've sent stickers out. I've still got 2 more envelopes of stickers to go out. I ran out of stamps. So as soon as I grab stamps, oh, and true story, I've stopped by 2 different post offices the past 2 days to walk in, and it was after hours in the self-serve stamp machine. One didn't have one, and one was broken. So as soon as I get stickers, whoever hasn't gotten theirs already that asked for them or, ordered them or whatever, will be getting them. I've got them sealed up and ready to go in my car. Just haven't sent them out yet. Brian, you've got a few things going on, I feel like.
Yeah.
He's taking summer seriously too, yeah. I think.
Yeah, summer's been enjoyable.
Yes.
Yes. So I get back on doing virtual classes. So that's gang-related stuff, proactive police stuff. Talked about at some point doing crime scenes, how to understand those. So those are more like just small 2-hour videos or an hour video at a time that people can message me, pay for, and it's a private link.
Okay.
Merchandise. There's still a shirt up at Minor League with like a lowrider car on it for the disruptors.
Yeah, that's a cool one.
That one's still up. And I'll be posting future episodes on the disruptors, linked up with a few more people in the music world as future guests that I think people are going to enjoy. So my fingers are crossed to be recording an episode next week.
Okay.
But I'll be posting another episode weekly. I got to get back on schedule.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same.
Yes.
All right. Well, you think you're ready to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to all of you, as always, for hopping in the chats and talking to us. We love you. Yeah, Bosco saying Forever Road podcast is still kicking. Go check him out.
Yep.
He likes to talk music and cars and a bunch of other life stuff. Wrestling. But I would say, wrestling?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say wrestling. I would say predominantly, yeah, music, cars, and life. That's what that one's about. But yeah. So we will be more diligent. We will be better about getting our stuff out there. But either way, we appreciate you guys. You're awesome. And I guess, until next time, we will see y'all next Tuesday. Night, y'all.